Good morning. Welcome to the St. Patrick's Day celebration breakfast as part of Holliston's 300th anniversary. First, thanks to Bob Blair for organizing this, and thanks to Bob Blair for inviting me to serve as MC today. My name's Bill Mayer. Cindy and I moved to Holliston back in 1984. So it means that we've been here about 40 years, so I don't qualify as a townie. I don't qualify as a newcomer, just an interested citizen. It's nice to be here. The program today is going to be a couple of short presentations, one by me, one by our local historian, one by Bob Blair. Then we'll break for breakfast, and then we'll have the featured matches of the invited guests who are going to be roasting each other and some of us in the audience. So thank you. I am half Irish. So just to put the credentials out there, but I didn't have a chance to visit Ireland until about 7 years ago when I responded to an advertisement regarding the availability of record-setting pike fishing in Ireland. I've been back to Ireland every year except the COVID year since that time for a week of pike fishing with some of my buddies in the fall of each year. It was my first real introduction to the country and the culture and the people, and I told Bob I'd share just a couple of quick snippets about what I've been able to observe and discern and experience while I was there. We landed there about 6 or 7 years ago, staying in what had been an private individual's home, an Irishman's home, converted into a bed and breakfast. And we take our daily meals there, but in the evening we'd walk downtown to have our evening meal and to visit the local pub. So the first night there, we walked out of the bed and breakfast and walked about 50 yards. Four of us, Dave Burrows, who with his family owns Ackerman Monument, the gravestone company heading out of town, and I and a couple of others. And a car pulled up alongside us, rolled down the window and says, "Hey, you lads going downtown?" I said, "Yeah, we are." "Well, hop in." So we hopped in, and it immediately occurred to me that I wasn't in Holliston. As warm and inviting as this town is, when would it happen that you'd be leaving with four fellas walking toward Milford, a car would pull up and offer you a ride? You'd be afraid there'd be some ulterior motive there. And as for people walking, why would you accept a ride from a stranger who's pulling up alongside you, offering to give you a ride? So, as it turns out, his family had been in Boyle, Ireland, which is about 2 hours inland from Dublin, for decades and decades, and it gave me a quick introduction to the nature of the Irish people there and how welcoming they are and how warm and friendly and trusting they are. When you have an evening meal, adult society in Ireland still focuses around the pub. Although the pubs now are smoking free, they are a place for socializing and catching up and whatever, darts and various activities. And I was first struck when you order a drink and you're expected to pay for it as soon as it's served to you. No tipping, no tabs. I said to the woman, there are going to be four of us here. We hope to be here for a while. Can we run a tab and pay at the end of the night? No, we're not going to do that. Why not? Well, you think I'm going to chase these lads down the sidewalk at the end of the night? I said, well, okay, we'll honor the local tradition. I also learned that despite the thought, right or wrong, that the Irish drink more than they should, that they have a zero tolerance for alcohol in driving now. There have been a whole range of tragic losses of life across the country, so they've now adopted a policy that it's zero alcohol consumption if you're going to drive. So they use Ubers, or they go by foot, or they arrange for designated driving. They're serious about it, and they're so serious about it that the Garda, as they call them, the police, will randomly pull people over in the morning to see if they're still under the influence from the previous night while they're on their way to work. So they take it very seriously. Another part of the society that appealed to me is the use and non-use of guns there. The police have guns that they use when they need to in the course of their employment, and the people who hunt have to train and get qualified, and they use shotguns to shoot deer and other things that they shoot, but they don't have widespread guns within the society, and they're proud of that. No mass shootings and none of that type of stuff, no AK-15s. And I'm not drifting into the political phase here, I'm just saying it was refreshing for me and it is refreshing for me to go back to a country that is not dominated by gun violence. And any of you who have not had the opportunity to go to Ireland, I'd encourage you to do that. My wife is not pleased with the fact that I go there just to fish. I haven't gone to the Cliffs of Moher. I haven't gone to some of the other locales because I'm just kind of focused and targeting what I'm doing. But they're a wonderful, wonderful group of people. So we're going to that's it for, I could go on, but I'm not going to bore you with that. We're not here to hear about my stories. I just want to tell you a little bit about the culture and what it's presently like. One quick announcement, the centerpieces that have been carefully crafted on each of your tables here today will go to the eldest person at that table. Now, and I leave that. We're on the honor system here, so it's the oldest person at the table gets the centerpiece. And no shifting tables now to gain advantage, okay? Now, in order to give us some perspective, on the role of the Irish and how they became integrated into Holliston, I'm going to call on our resident local historian, Joanne Hulbert, to share with us her thoughts on that, please. Joanne?
Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. Now for a little history lesson. But first, what I want to do is give a shout out and a tribute to all of the town officials near and far that happen to be here today. And I really think that we should acknowledge how important they are and have been essential to the entire history of Holliston. So what I want them to know is that we know that they have a lot of powers and abilities in order to keep this town in line in certain ways. And I want to point out, though, that there were some bylaws way back when that the Great and General Court of Massachusetts gave to selectmen as far back as 1794. And I want them to think about the fact about what they might try to find if those rules are still in force or whether or not they have fallen by the wayside. And one of them is, it's number 13 on the 1794 list, and it states that being thereto required by the judge of probate, that they shall inquisition respecting idiots, lunatics, or distracted persons. How would you like to have that for a law? You know, that's really good. They could put a lot of people into the House of Correction. The list goes on and on and on and on, including unruly servants and children. How'd you like that one? Also, soothsayers, people who are lascivious in speech and person. Oh, there was a whole bunch of good ones. Rogues, vagabonds, idle persons, using subtle craft of juggling and unlawful games of place. It goes on and on and on. They probably wish they could have that. By the time they got through this entire list, everybody in Holliston would be in the House of Correction and everything would be calm and quiet in town. That brings me to the story about Mudville. Now, there was an essay that was written in the early 20th century by a non-Irish person, obviously from reading it, that gave what it was called the St. Patrick and the Advent of the Irish in Holliston. Not once in this long essay was Mudville ever mentioned. You would think that that entire word had just gone out of our vocabulary totally, but it had not. The use of the word Mudville started, first time we saw it was in 1856. It's probably a word that comes from elsewhere. We like to think that we invented it. Well, let's think that we did, and that's fine. So 1856, we have an influx of Irish immigrants that are coming into Holliston. They came along with the railroad project, and many of them stayed to work in the boot and shoe shops and the straw factories and all that. So we got a lovely little neighborhood of Mudville called thus in 1856. But what of the people? In that story that was written by that non-Irish guy, who will remain nameless for the while anyway, those people were just sort of glossed over. In other words, he spent more time talking about all of those Yankee carpenters and real estate people who were giving out the mortgages to the people in Mudville. But they mentioned very little about who they were. So I'm going to bring up to you, since, by the way, Bobby says I can only talk for 5 minutes. I don't know that I've ever done anything in 5 minutes, so I got to really talk fast. So anyway, I'm going to talk to you about a few key people that give you an example about what life might have been like in Mudville. And my first one that I really want to talk about is Catherine Driscoll, a widow woman. Now, what's a widow woman going to do in 1856 in order to survive, in order to support herself? And yeah, she probably has a couple of kids at least. So what's she going to do? She's got a few options. She can take in laundry. She could take in boarders if she's got any room in her house at all. Some do, some don't. And if she takes in boarders, she's going to do their laundry too. So hopefully she gets paid double, but that's not likely. So what's Catherine Driscoll going to do in order to make enough money to survive? Well, it's written out here in the paper how she did it. God bless her. She was ordered to recognize as a common seller of whiskey before the Court of Common Pleas at Lowell, that's Superior Court, it was then too, on the third Monday in October next for trial. She wasn't alone. Mrs. Gallagher also probably accompanied her as well for the same charge. So what are you going to do? So women, you're going to do laundry, you're going to take in boarders, or are you going to make whiskey down in your cellar? And they did. And this was a common practice. They were not the only ones. It went on for decades. So, anyway, but what I really want to spend some time talking about, since this is St. Patrick's Day, is a couple of brothers who immigrated from Ireland, probably from City Court was the name of the place, from what we can figure. Two brothers. The names on the brothers were Hugh and Patrick Farley. How perfect for today. Now, in the 1850s, they came over. In the 1860s census, one was 16, one was 18, and they were both working in boot shops at that time, which was quite common. So I want to focus on the two of these because they were at a very critical time of not only immigration, but also, as you well know, in 1861 was the start of the Civil War. Now, several people in Holliston would enlist into Company B of Mass 16th, but no Irish need apply. It was all for the best, the brightest, and the Protestant. So things got a little bit dicey going through the summer and everything, and you needed to have a lot more people coming in to get enlistments. Some of the well-to-do in Holliston offered a $300 bounty in order to get somebody else to do it. We're not sure who, we do know who had those $300 bounties, but we're not quite sure who got them. But perhaps you and Patrick saw a really good chance to make a little bit of money for the family. And off the war they went together. Both of them were captured as POWs in 1864. Both of them spent time in camps. One record in town says they were both at Andersonville. We're not entirely sure of that. The records are a little bit sketchy, and a lot of the prisoners were moved around. Hugh was released and traded for other, the Confederate POWs in 1864, in the fall of 1864. But Patrick was there until 1865. Now, they both came home to Holliston. Hugh did pretty good. He did okay. He went back to working in the shoe shops and all. But as for Patrick, he had a lot rougher time. With the descriptions that we hear about Patrick, is that he suffered from what was clearly PTSD. The town did the best that they could in order to kind of keep him in line from time to time, find him something to do maybe, but he was definitely very damaged after the war experience. He outlived, though, all of his family. Hugh died and was buried at St. Mary's Cemetery in 1893. Patrick lived on until 1920. By that time, all of his family was dead. His body was brought back to Holliston from the facility from which he was spending time as an 82-year-old gentleman. Came back to Holliston, and we do know that he is buried at St. Mary's. Now, when you go down to see Hugh Farley's grave at St. Mary's, he has the requisite military issue stone. His name is barely able to read because it's marble, and acid rain has pretty well washed it away. But We're not sure where Patrick is. Is it possible that he's buried right next to Hugh? Hugh has the veterans' flags that he is due. But since we don't know where Patrick is, we'd like to find out. We'd like to find out if he is buried next to Hugh, or is he buried in a pauper's grave off to the side, or is he buried with his parents? We're not really sure if they're buried here or in Milford, because many of the Irish immigrants in Holliston were buried actually in Milford. So, my question is to all of you, if we want to do something for the history of Holliston, in this 300th year of our history, if we want to do something that would commemorate St. Patrick's Day and someone named Patrick Fowley, who lived in Holliston, fought in the Civil War, endured all of the damage for the rest of his life until he was 82. How about if we could find where Patrick is buried? Maybe even get a stone for him, but at least get him with the veterans' flags that he is due. So, I put it out all to you. Perhaps this is really a fun thing that we can do in order to honor Mudville and honor somebody who grew up here, who fought in the Civil War, came back, and is now among us again. So, let's see if we can find Patrick. See if we can get his grave marked and also get him some veterans' flags as well. So, I want to also end by saying that there is a lot of history to do with Mudville. But one thing that I really like, there was a poem that was written in 1856, but it really tells it all. It's a rather long poem, so I'm not going to go into it anymore. But this is what the opening verse on that poem about Mudville and Holliston was. Come, my beloved, haste away. Cut short the hours of thy delay. Fly, like a youthful hart or roe, to the spot where barns to houses grow. The truth is that many of the houses in Mudville were actually barns and sheds, some of them strung together, some of them are still houses that exist, but that's how many of the houses in Mudville became homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. It's very informative. I'm now going to introduce to you Bob Blair. I met Bob when he was a letter carrier here in Holliston, and I had the privilege of being on his route, and then our paths crossed many times at various town events and meetings and things over the years, and I developed enormous respect for him, and I think it's reciprocal. For those of you who have not directly benefited from his efforts and generosity, you see his work on display during the growing season. If you drive through downtown Holliston, you see all those beautiful floral displays that he and his helpers pulled together, the Marigold Project, I think they call it now, and helps to beautify our town. Bobby's been a part of Mudville since his great-grandfather, Cornelius Driscoll, arrived on 61 School Street in 1847, 177 years ago, followed by his great-great-grandfather, William Fair, who arrived to 143 Union Street in 1853. He is the designated mayor of Mudville. I'm a mayor from Holliston, but I consider him to be the mayor of Holliston, too. So I want you to ask you to join me in welcoming him for some brief comments. After Bob's comments, we're then going to have the breakfast, and then we'll have the roast after that. So thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bill. Cade Mill Falcher. 100,000 welcomes in Irish. Charlie King on Winthrop Street used to say, if you get up in the morning and see the sun rise and have something to eat, you've seen a miracle and had a feast. I just wanted to throw a few thank yous out to the select board who let us have the use of the hall here. It's kind of nostalgic for me because I went to 6th grade in 1962 down in the assessor's office. We didn't need a school resource officer at that time. The police station was right across the hallway. I came up here for my polio shot. I was dead afraid of needles. And right over there, I threw up all over the stage. I came up here for dance classes. My mother was going to make me a gentleman. And Friday nights, $3 with Mr. Brown. I hated every minute of it. So thank you, Select Board, for funding also, to the Lions Club for serving, TJ's for catering, the Legion and Steve Bradford for the PA system, the 300th for partnering with us, and my right-hand person, Deb Moore, right there, who she's the second coming of Pat Duffy. I don't know if any of you, Pat passed away last year. If you wanted something done, you got Pat. And she could be abrasive sometimes. And more than once, she had her foot in her mouth, and, you know, it would make a construction guy blush. But she was also generous. And Deb has helped me out immensely. This week I got an email. You haven't answered your phone for 2 days. So she's right into the details. John, keep her around a few more years. As a sometime journalist for the Reporter, we always like to keep our ear to the ground. Scuttlebutt, rumor, you name it around town. That's how you pick up news stories. And I had heard some things. You have to track them down to find out the truth. And some of them were about these folks right behind me. So I kind of like to throw a few things out that we have been hearing. Kevin Conley, right over here. He's like a horse with no name, a man without a country. He was selectman there for a while, and then he headed up the Blair Square renovation. Martha says he's driving her nuts down there, you know, till the golf links open up. So there's a spot on the select board that you might jump in, Kev. Ken Zaheda, Dr. Ken, you know, he's partly responsible, along with the people here at Town Hall, for having the high bond rating that we have here in town. That's not so down in Washington. And Ken kind of said, geez, maybe I'll put in an application for a high-level job at the Fed and help Janet Yellen out. So Ken started filling out the application. It was great till you get down to the woke part. Believe it or not, they have a woke section on applications now. You know, they really want to find out what you're all about. Are you from a single-parent home? Were you on food stamps? And it went on, and it got down to a point, it said, do you like broccoli? Ken thought for a moment, and he said, what the heck has this got to do with finances? So he tore up the application, and he's going to be staying with us for a while. Carolyn Dykema. She's nice to see you again, Carolyn. It was like you disappeared off the face of the earth. Carolyn was a commensurate politician. Wherever you went, there was Carolyn. And she's been asked to take a 1-month leave of absence from her job in the solar industry. And she has been asked by the governor. Governor Haley asked her to take that 1-month break, come here to Holliston and see if she couldn't help out. Ironically, Carolyn lives on Marshall Street, where if you had been by, you went by one day the old Bird property, and they cut down the forest. The next week you went up and there was the solar panels come out of nowhere. Well, it seemed the town of Holliston has been trying to put solar panels on the landfill. And I think it's 4 or 5 years now. So Governor Healy is giving Carolyn carte blanche, step in, do what has to be done, and see if we can get the solar panels up. While she's at it, she also asked Carolyn to look into our big dig down on Woodland Street. The 8-arch bridge was put up in less than a year in 1846 by a bunch of Irishmen. And here we are struggling to replace one little dinky wee dam. So the governor has been gracious to Carolyn. She's sending out 6 Irishmen, picks, axe, and shovels. She's sending out lunchbox corned beef sandwiches and Guinness, and hopefully it'll be done up in a couple of weeks. She's also sending out a truck to take down all the ugly detour signs. Good luck on that job. Our new state rep, we just found out he has been appointed by the Speaker of the House to a committee on aging. Ironically, his wife, Lena, who heads up the senior center over in Westwood, has been asked to take a leave of absence from her job and head up a new committee at the State House, Aging and Seniors. James, you and your committee will be reporting to Lena. Some things just never change. And Dan, you were known as the fence jumper around town. You went from the finance committee, and all of a sudden you were the chairman of the school committee. I mean, wow. But we just found out you want to jump another fence. You'd like to go to the Massachusetts School Building Committee. So you will be absconding from your job as chairman, and if you think your taxes went up a lot this spring, just wait till he makes chairman of that committee. John Shanahan. John has been involved in the Mudville Baseball Club for the last 20 years. They had a get-together down at Blair Square this past fall, and John has decided, hey, maybe it's time to turn this into something. So he's come up with the idea of having an old-time baseball museum right here in Holliston. They've already been out looking at sites. If you've seen them out with Ed Daniels or the Chisholm Girl, whatever, looking at sites, you'll know what they're up to. They looked at the old state lumber cellar hole down there. That'd be clean up that area. The field across from the high school, Finn's Field, 555 Hopping Brook Road. The old Wild Building on Summer Street, and Marcelin Institute. They've already got a Facebook site and a GoFundMe. So Tina, he'd be a great one for the one of the committees here in town, economic development. And Tina, you've been asked by the folks down in Washington. They were enthralled with your walking school bus program. And someone down there picked up on it, and they're starting a new program in Washington, D.C. to get the kids to school, and they'd like you to head it up. The obstacles will be a little different down in Washington, D.C., as you know. We have to watch out down there. Instead of whose mother's there on what morning, down in D.C., you'll have to navigate the pedophiles, the addicts, the carjackers, the pickpockets, the homeless, and the alcoholics. It didn't take the politicians in Washington long to pick up on that Tina was coming down there. And they would like to split up Pennsylvania Avenue, cut it in half and rename one part. I guess the business people down there were complaining about the vagrants being out in front, so they've come up with this idea to rename that thing. And the politicians jumped right on it. President Joe Biden would like to have it renamed Hunter Biden Boulevard. One reluctant Republican said, name it Cocaine Alley. And even the socialists jumped in. Bernie Sanders' Socialist Path. How's that sound? So we wish you well in your new job down there. As a journalist, you get to look at all sides of the story. And we found out that Travis, Tina's husband out there, won't be going down. He'll be staying home, taking care of and feeding the couple's pet chickens. Macaronian. We found out he's been offered the job as head's groundkeeper at the White House. You know, high profile. I mean, the benefits are great. 401k, 4 or 5 weeks vacation, health plan. And they say the cocaine at the White House is just out of this world. Thank you.
Well, my notes said that Bob Blair wanted to give a few thank yous and good wishes, so I guess the roast started a little early. I'm sure you're all as hungry as I am, too, so we're going to have the meal first. Bob has asked if you please show courtesy and allow the head table to get in line first, and then proceed in an orderly fashion. Then we'll do the roasting after we've had a nice meal. Thank you. If I can, we'd like to extend a thanks to the Masons for doing all the setup here today. They were not included in the list of folks we commented earlier with sponsors and donations, so let's thank the Masons for all the effort in setting up here today. And I'm told that on this special day we have a birthday person in the group. We have Abel Clark, who's 34 years old. Abel, come up and get your cake, please. Is Abel? Yeah? No. Where's Abel? Come on, Abel. This is the last time. Unless you make it to 100, this is the last time we're going to have 135 people singing happy birthday to you, Abel. So here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Abel. Happy birthday to you. Well, now it's time for the entertainment segment of our gathering here today. So we're going to have a roast. The order was randomly assigned and selected. We're going to start off with Ken Shader, longtime chairperson of the Holliston Finance Committee. Ken?
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here again. I apologize for the late start, but Bill told me he couldn't start until he found 100 registered voters in the room. I also want to give thanks before I get started to Bobby Blair for doing his best Foster Brooks imitation. So here we are, St. Patrick's Day. As most of you know, I'm not Irish, which is why I don't usually wear green. I mean, this is the best I could do, and as I said, the reason I don't wear this is because I got paint on it years ago. Other than this, and this isn't even traditional Irish green, so I don't think I own anything that's even traditional Irish green. My biggest issue with St. Patrick's Day is really the food. I'm not a fan of corned beef or cabbage, and actually during the budget season I'm a big fan of cabbage, but unfortunately the town doesn't have any. The other issue I have with St. Patrick's Day is that Irish food can be deadly. Most people don't know this, and Joanne could verify this, but Abe Lincoln actually served corned beef and cabbage at the first inaugural luncheon. That is a true fact. And you see what happened to him. Okay. Is it too soon for Lincoln jokes? But today everyone is Irish, and of course we're all here to have some fun. And when Bobby told me if I would participate this year, I was flattered. After being relegated to a table of my own the last 2 times I was here, I finally made it to the adult table. But then I heard that Kevin was invited too, so clearly he's just letting anyone in now. Okay? And I'll apologize in advance if I'm a little grumpy today, because I feel like I was a little bit misled. Bobby told me this was going to be a traditional Irish breakfast, and I expected 3 shots of whiskey and a beer, so. Well, when I heard that Kevin was going to be here, I thought to myself, why would he want to be here? Hasn't been on the select board in years. But then I remembered that Kevin is the local expert on retreads. Okay. Actually, Bobby told me that the only reason he's here is because they told him this is a public hearing to close Lowland Street. But, speaking of Bobby Blair, you know, the other thing that I was reminded of was that this is Holliston's 300th. It's also the 300th anniversary of when he graduated from the Andrews School. So, but Kevin's not the only former select board member here today. We're fortunate to have Mr. Aronian here as well. Mark is here because his whole life has been an obsession with the color green. He probably single-handedly responsible for most of the plantings on town property. He's donated his time and his energy in service to Holliston, and we're all grateful for that. He's the town tree expert and even served as the town's tree warden before he was on the select board. What most people don't know is that his tree expertise was key to his tenure on the select board. Whenever he was asked a question, his answer was always, "I'm stumped." Also joining us at the adult table is the chair of the school committee. As most of you know, Dan and I have been friends for a long time, and he was my vice chair until he decided to defect to the school committee. I'll admit that for a time I struggled to understand why anyone would want to go from the finance committee to the school committee, but I guess Dan is living proof that COVID really does cause brain damage. And as many of you know, Dan's wife Carla is here today, is also very active in Holliston. Dan and Carla really are a dynamic duo and a major power couple in Holliston. Dan chairs the school committee, Carla chairs the library board and serves on a number of things, including helping out today. She's also involved in the Girl Scouts, so she is single-handedly responsible for the 10 boxes of peanut butter patties I eat every January. And between the school and library budgets, they're also responsible for about 60% of my tax bill. But speaking of the schools, some people say I'm good at finding creative solutions to solve the town's problems. I've been giving a lot of thought to everything that's been going on here lately, and I have a big idea that could solve several of our problems at once. First, move the water treatment plant to the central office of the high school. Then put sewers everywhere in town. This way you can just flush your tax dollars down the toilet and they'll go directly to the schools so we don't have to bother with the whole budget process. This also explains why Dan's been a proponent of sewers in town. But to be fair, people always ask me why I roast the schools every time I'm here. But how can I not roast the schools? I spend every spring listening to them whine about needing more money and how they don't get enough attention. If I didn't know better, I'd think they were my ex-wife. In some sense, they are like my ex-wife, since they also take 50% of my money. But as we know, the town never seems to have enough money. Part of the reason that the budget is tight is because the state has been shifting the tax burden to municipalities by barely raising state aid each year. I speak about this every May in town meeting. This is why it's important to have a good relationship with our state rep, so we can tell him we need more money, and he can say, your concerns are very important to me, which is political speak for no effing way. Speaking of our state rep, you may not know that I've known James's wife, Lena, longer than I've known James, since she was the senior center director here for many years. I used to review her budget annually. Lena and I have always had a special bond since we share Italian heritage. What this really means is that every time she sees me, she says I'm too skinny and wants to give me food, but I digress. I really got to know James when he decided to run for state rep, and this is a true story. Many of you don't know this, but during the primary campaign, I helped keep track of the votes on the day of the primary. This is a true story. As the numbers came in, James was convinced he was going to lose. I told him he was going to win based on the numbers I was seeing and that he shouldn't worry. I showed him how the votes were coming in were going to result in a significant victory for him. I was obviously right because here he is as our state rep. But that whole experience made it clear to me why he's the perfect state rep. He dresses like a mobster and doesn't know math. Finally, I wouldn't be a roast without saying something about the one person here who is a current select board member. Aside from the fact that I'm going to have the end of Fifth Street renamed to Shada Way so I have a better sense of place, lots of people think that Tina and I don't get along simply because we don't agree on everything. But that's not true. I've actually known Tina for a very long time. In fact, I met her many years ago when we were both single. I saw her at a college party, and I have to say she was quite the looker. Things never went anywhere, though. I knew we weren't a good match when I went up to her and said, "What's your sign?" And she said, "No trucks." Okay. On that note, I'd like to say thank you and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Well, in order to allow for a quick and timely response, I'm going to change the batting order that we had listed in the program, and I'm going to call on our current selectwoman, Tina Hine, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay in the back? All right. So I'm lucky. I have two Travises in my life. The most important one is my husband. He is an MIT engineer with an all-boys Catholic education who I love dearly and who has supported me tirelessly during my time on the select board. We've been married for 28 years, and together we share 4 beautiful children. With his kindness and love, and more than enough with his 2 degrees from MIT, he has all it takes to make his wife happy. And it looks like I chose well those years ago. And then there's the other Travis. He's okay too. It was my husband Travis who suggested that I watch a recording of the last St. Patrick's Day roast to better prepare myself for today. However, after following that advice, I'm now rethinking our entire relationship. Like seriously, we might not make it to 29 years. I mean, what a way to take the mickey out of me before my first time up here. I watched the entire 2018 roast, and wow. Did you see James Marsden back then? He sang and played guitar like a true Irish traveler. He had the entire room laughing with tears in their eyes. It was quite the performance, of the likes not seen since COVID turned the world upside down as we know it, and I got elected. Obviously, I am no Jay Marsden. I don't have his good looks or his law degree, and I definitely don't have his fan base over on the Finance Committee. So I had to take a different approach to be up here right now, use a different sort of humor that is a bit more reflective of the journey I've been on since 2019. I hope you enjoy me sharing some observations from my past 5 years on the select board. I'm glad some zingers were thrown already, because here goes. People say that I'm tall, but before I joined the select board, I only thought I was tall. Now I know that I am, and boy, there are a lot of short, bald men in town. It's good that we start our meetings in sitting. I swear my seat is always in the lowest position at the table. Before I joined the select board, I thought money made the world go round. Now I know that money is Ken's world, and he's going to tell you all about it at Maytown meeting. I can't wait to hear more again this year, Ken. Before I joined the select board, I was advised not to burn bridges, and I take that advice seriously, so now I just close them. But I think that... I think that's going well. At least it's going well for the turtles of Factory Pond. Before I joined the select board, I only ever worked alongside other women professionally. And this has been one of the most wonderful experiences of my time on the board, waiting for another woman to join me. To the ladies out there, it's not too late to pick up your nomination papers for this May. And I'm looking right at you, Carolyn. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge the cast of characters I serve alongside. Any good public servant is molded and influenced by the other public servants around them. Kevin, Ken, Dan, Mark, James, how do I start with your effect on me? I guess I'll start with how grateful I am to serve alongside John and Ben. There is nothing better than talking about hair products with them before our meetings start. In case you are wondering, we all totally agree that Paul Mitchell gives you the best shine up top. Sorry, Ken. When I say Paul Mitchell, I really mean Swab. It's $1.99 for the economy size. The Finance Committee would never allow for more than that. I'm not sure if you know this about Dan Alfred, but he loves working with women, so much so that he left the Finance Committee to join the all-female school committee. And I hear that's going really well for them over at the Holliston Public Schools. So enjoy your time with him, ladies, because I think he might have pulled papers for Parks and Rec and the Planning Board this year. Speaking of the upcoming election, no one has pulled papers for the Finance Committee. Not sure why. I hear it's like Barbie Land over there. It's really all about the Ken show. I often hear that my voice is soft during public speaking, so you've got to love Dan's boisterous, loud personality. It cuts right through the noise of all the trucks going by outside. I really appreciate that about him. I also really appreciate Ben's appreciation of everyone. He is a gentle soul and a kind person, among the very best of all of us. Speaking of gentle souls, John is an absolute pussycat, a kitten among men. It's hard sometimes to have to be the aggressive one on the board, but John gives me plenty of space to fully express myself in that way. He's been a true mentor to me. This feels like a good time to pause and highlight some of the work from my time on the select board. People might think that the hardest part of the role is doing hair and makeup before the meetings, but really there's much, much more to it. I mean, it took real effort to put all those new sidewalks in Mudville. I'm especially proud of all the progress the board has made on traffic management. If you look at Mass DOT traffic data, you can see just how much traffic conditions have improved here in Holliston, but don't trust me or the data. Just ask Bob Nemeth on Facebook. There's a lot of good information out there to be found about the good work done by the select board on Facebook. I'm glad to see everyone here today pack the house. I see that many of you drove cars here to get here today. I'm impressed you made it. It sure looks like we need to do a better job closing roads. This was way too easy for you. Seriously though, thank you to Bobby Blair for inviting me to be up here. I'm grateful to share this stage with all the hardworking, dedicated elected officials, past and present, up here with me. May the road always rise up to meet you in your service to this amazing 300-year-old town. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you all.
Wasn't that terrific? Well, let's hear next from State Representative James Arena DeRosa. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. It's great to be here as we celebrate Holliston's 300th and the Irish contribution to this wonderful community. It's great to be here with all the town leaders who've been so good to me. I'm enjoying working with you. It's great to have our former rep here, Carolyn Dykema, a good friend. And, you know, I knocked on hundreds of doors when I first ran, and you have to brace yourself for some of the questions. Some of them are really tough, and every once in a while you get, I have a question for you. And the most popular question in the whole campaign, are you bringing back Carolyn Dykema's picnic? True story, right? We kept track of them all, so, and we are, and I'm gonna have to talk with her about it. But anyway, so last night, I get a text from Tina at about 10 o'clock. Are you ready for the roast with your jokes? And I said, roast? I said, no. I said, what? I completely missed it, sorry. Although I have a few that I'll add. And I love Bobby Blair's note to all of us as speakers. He says, you have 5 minutes to speak. 7 if you have wit. So I'm gonna do 3 minutes because my kids did 23andMe, the DNA testing. Let's just say that Irish wit was not on the list of James's DNA traits. And of course, I had resisted doing it for years. When it first came out, it wasn't very sophisticated. And the boys wanted to do it. I said, save your money. I said, you know, you're gonna spend $100. We're gonna get a piece of paper back that says, this person's Italian, right? No kidding, save your money, right? But Bobby, I know you know your history. You know St. Patrick was Italian Roman, right? Historical. Okay, he's shaking his head. Oh, good, didn't argue with me. No, it's true. I mean, it's like the Pope, though, right? Everyone loves him in Argentina. It's like me. Parents are Italian, grandparents are Italian. Anyway. So we get the test back, and let's just say that unlike some Massachusetts politicians that talk about their family lore, we had family lore. I had a grandparent who was an orphan we never really knew. Come to find out, I am 1/8, if you look at the map, African, Asian into South Asia and the Middle East. Kind of cool, but also a reminder that we all came from someplace. And I'm not going to get political. What's going on the border is a disaster, but we need to be good to immigrants and treat everyone with respect. And Joanne talked about this a little bit, about the Irish immigrants. There's a great monument in Holliston, notwithstanding the tribute to baseball on Bobby's front lawn. I love Bobby. We share a birthday, and I came from Walpole where the fireworks were on my birthday, talk about ego all my life. Then I come here, we have big parties on Mudville on my birthday. I'm like, this is great. But anyway, there's a little monument on the corner of Exchange and Union, and it reminds us that here in Holliston, at one point in time, more shoes and boots were built than anywhere in the entire country. We had a thriving manufacturing economy, and it was recent Irish immigrants who were the backbone of that economy, right? The Irish are a remarkable story. Came to this country mostly with nothing, came from the tragedy of the famine, a lot of them, and within 100 years had helped elect one of our own beloved Jack Kennedy as President of the United States, one of their own. What an amazing story that they went through. And I have so much respect for Irish politicians that remember their past. The tobacco spitters in the South used to yell at Tip O'Neill during the 60s and civil rights. They used to say, "Why do you care so much about civil rights and those black people?" He'd yell back, "Why do I care? I'll tell you why I care. No Irish need apply. I'm not going to let what happened to my people to happen to other people in America. We're better than that. We should treat everybody with dignity and respect." And I'll tell you one more quick tip story before I give up the mic. So I'm in Young Democrats in the early 80s, and some bright mind in our group says, "Let's invite Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, to come and talk to our group." I'm like, "Sure. Let's get the third most powerful person in the world to hang out with some college kids." So we actually get a note back from the Speaker's office. They say, "Sure, he'll stop by on his way to the Cape. We'll get him there." So we're very excited. We're like in our 20s. We're waiting outside. The event goes from 7 to 9. So it's 7, 7:15, 7:30. We're getting a little antsy. 7:45, 8 o'clock, getting a little nervous. And we were just hoping for that typical politician, breeze in, breeze out, 3 minutes, get a picture, right? 8:15, 8:30. Now it's like, oh my God, he's going to blow us off. This is embarrassing. A little after 8:30, car pulls up. Tip O'Neill jumps out of the car. "Hey guys, how's everyone doing?" We realized he is all by himself, drove himself, Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, comes into the event, gives his little talk, sits down and has dinner with us, and then he says, "Come on, let's go to the bar." Let's go to the bar. 2 hours with Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House of Representatives. No social media, no cameras, no posting, no TikTok, he didn't care about that stuff. Most of it wasn't around, but he didn't care. I think he was thrilled to have 2 hours with young people who cared to make a difference, to share some of his wisdom. Maybe he was just happy to spend a couple hours away from it all. What a kind and gracious man to give that kind of time to young people. I cannot imagine Washington leaders doing those things today. And Tip O'Neill was a leader in this country when Ronald Reagan was president. And they had very different political philosophies on how to get there. But they both loved this country dearly and cared so much about how to find compromise, to work together and move the country forward. What great role models compared to the nonsense going on in Washington today. And to me, I always think of Tip O'Neill on St. Patrick's Day. I mean, to me, he's the consummate, all the great things about an Irish politician that cared deeply about community and cared about others and tried to make a difference. And to me, he's somebody who worked all over the world with people from different cultures. I love various cultural celebrations. To me, it is the sum of our parts that makes America great. And to me, the Irish are just such a wonderful part of the American mosaic. Thank you all. It's great to be with you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And next time I'll prepare jokes. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker is going to be Dan Alfred. Dan is a former member of the Finance Committee. He's presently chairman of the School Committee. He is, to my experience, a plain-speaking fellow. Usually if I have interaction with Dan, it's always professional, but from time to time, I have to kind of avoid him from speaking directly or bluntly about members of the Board of Selectmen or their decisions or things in my role as moderator at town meeting. I'm always trying to preserve decorum. So he'll find it refreshing today that I'm going to do nothing more than introduce him as a plain-speaking fellow. Unlike Jim, Dan, I'm sure I said ample opportunity to note that this is in fact a roast, and he's free to say any darn thing he wants to about anybody here. So Dan, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's nice to actually be recognized by you for once. So anyway, I want to thank Bobby Blair for inviting me and giving me a little bit of PTSD. I feel like I'm back at the Finance Committee table at town meeting. Also, thank you for inviting me. Wasn't totally sure why I was invited, but then I remembered that I now represent the 800-pound gorilla in the room at the school committee. But as James spoke, I was struck by something he said. He said he didn't know that this was a roast and that he didn't realize that, but then he proceeded to quote a letter that you sent us that specifically lay out the fact that it was a roast. So he clearly just missed that whole fact, and I wonder if that's not where a few missing zeros from the school department's state aid went during the budget process. He just sort of simply missed them. I think, Tina, you did a really good job. When I saw your parents were here, I was wondering if they might do it for you, come up and actually give the speech for you, as they sometimes do at town meeting. All right, that's about as harsh as I'm going to get today. But anyway, as the clearly the youngest person up here today, I thought, I'm not actually really good at sort of preparing jokes, and so what I thought is I would do is I'd turn to AI to help me. And so I went into ChatGPT, or actually Bing's version, and I just simply typed in, please write me some roast jokes for this person of Holliston, Massachusetts. That was it. And so I'm going to read some of those now, and just so you can kind of understand how good AI has become. So, Ken's cookie diplomacy. Ken's secret weapon in town meeting is chocolate chip cookies. When negotiations get heated, he slides a warm cookie across the table, and suddenly everyone's too busy munching to bother. MIT brain power. I swear hand to God, this came out of the thing all of itself. Ken's got 3 degrees from MIT. Rumor has it his PhD thesis was titled Quantum Mechanics of Cookie Dough, and his postdoc Advanced Baking Algorithms. For those of you who don't know, we always joke about Ken having 3 degrees from MIT because he talks about it every once in a while. So Ken is the AAA rating whisperer. Ken's finance prowess got Holliston its first ever AAA rating from S&P. He's like Willy Wonka of municipal bonds, golden tickets for everyone. Tina's the pedestrian safety warrior. Tina's passion about pedestrian safety is so strong, she's like the guardian angel of crosswalks. But sometimes she takes it too far. Once she stopped a squirrel from jaywalking. That's a true story. Tina's Facebook fact-checking. Tina's on a mission to combat misinformation. She's a mythbuster of Holliston, but her favorite tool is Facebook comments. She's got a PhD in debunking Aunt Karen's conspiracy theories. Let's see, Mark's pickup truck. So Mark's landscaping truck has seen it all. It's like a mobile horticultural command center. Rumor has it it's equipped with soil PhD tester, a hedge trimming laser, and secret compartment for emergency mulch. Carolyn only had one about you, which I know as a former politician probably surprises and upsets you because we know how much attention politicians like. But the energy alchemist, Carolyn's transition from politics to solar energy industry is like a plot twist in a superhero movie. She's now Captain Solar, fighting climate change one sunbeam at a time. Her secret weapon, a pocket-sized solar panel. Okay, so that is the. Oh no, sorry. I guess I'm a couple of Kevin. Talking with Kevin is sometimes like GPS directions in a corn maze. Confusing, winding, and you're never quite sure if you'll ever get to the point. That was written by AI. I swear to God. Maybe. You never know. If Kevin ever writes a memoir, it'll be titled From Selectman to Neglected Man, a Holliston Odyssey. So that's where AI gets you these days. A couple that I tried to take my hand at, but so when Ken joined the Finance Committee, there was only one traffic light in downtown. Water was brown. The sidewalks and crosswalks were in horrible shape. However, since Tina's joined the Select Board, there have been 0 new traffic lights that have been put up in town. So I ask you, who really is the pedestrian safety champion? And then so when Kevin first approached me about his idea for invigorating Blair Square, it was about a $100,000 project, completed in a year. Bobby, you kind of ruined this one for me, but after $700,000 in like 3 years, it basically is Holliston's version of the Big Dig. But it's beautiful. So thank you all very much. I don't have anything really touching to say because I'm not that kind of warm and fuzzy person, but appreciate the time and thank you.
Very nice, Dan. Now we're going to hear from a true, not that we haven't had him already, a true gentleman, John Shanahan, who personifies Mudville baseball and his connection to that area of town. So John, come on up and share some thoughts with us, please. Thank you.
I feel fortunate to be the non-politician up at the desk today, but it's a pleasure to see so many familiar faces. Coming here, I look down and we're here to celebrate our Irish heritage, and I see all the old campersolds up here in the front. I see my good classmate from way back when, Stanley O. Herberski, is here somewhere. Stanley, right there, good Irishman. Of course, we have the McGuires and Sheehans in the back, and my favorite Irishman in Holliston is Peter Barberi, who everyone believes is the pride of South Framingham, but following his ancestry DNA test, he found out he was more Irish than Italian. So those dinners at La Cantina might come with a little Irish whiskey in the future. But, speaking of my own heritage, I also took the Ancestry.com DNA test. And for those of you for whom today's the only day of the year that you're Irish, well, I'm pretty much Irish 365 days a year. According to my most recently updated results, I am 87% Irish DNA, 8% Welsh, and 5% English. And my son, who's here, has done extensive research on the family tree, and we can pretty much pinpoint where those characteristics come from. For instance, the 8% Welsh would be a result of my great-grandfather, Richard Evans, who was a member of the 8th Ohio Division in the Civil War and is buried in Cleveland, Ohio. And my wife and I are actually going to be visiting his gravesite not a week, it's this upcoming Saturday. The 5% English come from my great-grandfather, Herbert Miller, from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Naturally, being 5% English, we don't talk about him too much. But, it indicates that I'm here representing the Mudville Baseball Club. And as the Mudville Baseball Club developed in 2003, we immediately recognized that the poem Casey at the Bat had a strong Irish influence on it by the names of the players. And we, in fact, our uniforms had what we believed to have been a shamrock on the shoulder, only to later find out it was four-leaf clover. But in the early days of the team, on St. Patrick's Day or the Saturday prior, we would go and march in the St. Patrick's Day parade in Hartford, which was a great, great event. And the first time we went down, we actually had the mayor of Mudville, Bobby Blair, with us. And we were pleased to find out as we got to the end of the parade route, we were about to meet the mayor of Hartford at the time at the review stand right at the end. So I've got at home a great picture of Bobby and the mayor. And I'm happy to report that of those two mayors, only one of them ended up in federal prison for corruption. So anyway, being a non-politician, I can make my speech a little brief, but it's a pleasure to be with all of you, and Arengo Bra.
John, that's beautiful. The next speaker, I think, personifies the adage that some ascribe to here in Massachusetts, that we hate the legislature, but we love our state rep. And you wonder how it sounds incongruous, but I think that's kind of how it works out. It certainly is true here. There may be a number of us that from time to time lack confidence in the state rep, but I don't know if there's anybody in town that doesn't love Carolyn Dykema. So she's going to be our next roaster. Thank you.
Ooh, this is something, huh? Bobby Blair, you got your roast. This is like some real roasted material. And I'm seeing a little relief on folks' faces out here, thinking like, I'm glad I'm not up there. So all of these are very familiar faces to everyone. I think everyone recognizes everybody up here. These are like the notables of Holliston. And everybody is like looking at me going like, who is that? God, like haven't seen, like she looks vaguely familiar, but like, I don't know. And then got one woman over here singing like, is she that woman from TikTok? I don't know. And then we got a couple over here, the guy's leaning over to his wife going, oh my God, I think that's Barbara Gardner. Is that Barbara Gardner? Barbara Gardner's here. Like, she's so close. So yeah, I'm Carolyn Dykema. I used to be your state rep before James. Phil did a terrific job filling the role, and I was really excited to be welcomed back to celebrate the 300th. And this is the first event of a massive celebration of our 300th anniversary here in Holliston, which is terrific. And I want to first just give a shout out to the team, the 300th committee, and Bobby and everyone, Deb, that made this all possible. It's such an important thing. So can we give a round of applause to the team, please? This stuff doesn't happen on its own. It takes a lot of people and a lot of time and a lot of heart. So thank you all. So 300th anniversary, like, wow, that is amazing. Like, I can't even get my head around 300 years and like the change that's happened in Holliston in 300 years. Like, honestly, I can't even get my head around like what's happened in the last few years, never mind 300 years. So I thought I'd just share a couple of thoughts. So like downtown, we got like the Oddfellows building and Super got a whole new facelift. Looks awesome, doesn't it? Like, we got new paint, we got a new parking lot. It's terrific. And as my daughter Julie would say, she's like, that is bougie. Holliston is truly bougie. And then I thought like, well, yeah, someplace else got a facelift too. And I heard that we got a whole new entry to the industrial park. Did you guys hear that? I think it was like mentioned a few times today already. Fawn Road. Wow. That's pretty nice. That is bougie. And I thought, like, it's such a vivid, like, visual, right? You can, like, almost close your eyes and think, like, wow, I see, like, little woodland creatures and, like, beautiful grassy knoll, like Fawn Road. That's awesome. And so, like, it's just so vivid. It makes you almost forget about, like, the trucks and the fact that it's an industrial park, doesn't it? Like, that is top shelf. So then, another big change, I get an email from Paul Saulnier just the other day. Paul Saulnier's here. Paul and I go way back. So Paul sends me an email and he said, you won't believe it. They're talking about sewers again. They're setting up another sewer planning committee. What do you think? Do you want to give it another go? It's like, wow, Paul, sewers. Again. Version 36.4. Let me tell you, I can't do it again, but I give a big shout out to the team that's going to take on this big, important task. Because, those are some bold souls. You never know. Maybe the 36th time really is the charm. Maybe this is it. So, go sewers. And I hope Paul's going to be a part of it. I think he heard me laughing all the way from his house. So, yeah. And then, lastly, another big change, which I can't help but mention. So, Dan Alfred, big name, here in Holliston. Most of you know him from FinCom. Seen him at many town meetings in FinCom, and I hear he's changed his hats now. He's not a FinCom member anymore. He has gone over to the school committee. That is a big move, and I know he is doing an excellent job. But I got to tell you, when I first heard that, I thought, Dan Alfred, school committee. Wow. School committee. So I guess I'll just leave it there, Dan. I'm sure you're doing a great job. So, it's the 300th as I said, big deal, big crowd, sold out crowd from what I hear today, which is great, celebrating our history here in Holliston. And I was so excited as I was walking down to the mailbox, and I opened the mailbox and I saw that beautiful invitation, like the, beautiful stationery with like the gold embossed invite. I was like, wow, that's class. So proud to be from Holliston. Oh, you guys didn't get that? You didn't get that invitation? No, I actually didn't get it either. I got the 21st century version of that invitation, which is a Facebook message. So I get the Facebook message from Bobby, who says, basically, hey, stranger, we're doing the breakfast again. What do you think? You want to come roast or be roasted? Let me know. So that was my invitation to be here. Of course, how could I resist that? Of course I've got to go for Bobby. But then, of course, I've been in politics for a while, so my first thought is what's the angle here? They want to get me in the room for something. Bobby's got something up his sleeve. I don't know if I want to do this. And then my second thought was oh, they really want me to be there. They miss me. Yeah, I'm gonna go. And then my third thought was that's definitely not true. So then my fourth thought was I get it now. There's a little light bulb went off over my head, and I was I know why Bobby wants me there. Bobby wants to hear his song. So was anybody here at the breakfast back in 2017? Yeah, so Bobby has a song. You may not know it. The mayor of Mudville, our Bobby Blair, has a song dedicated to him. And he wanted to hear it again for the 300th. So there was no way I was doing that again. So I've kind of cheated, and Bobby's a little upset with me, but I've decided to, instead of having an imitation recreation and reproduction, which really wouldn't have done it, I decided to bring him the real thing. So on the 300th anniversary, who better to honor in town in Holliston than a man who truly embodies the spirit of this community, has given so much back, and is our dear and favorite Mayor of Mudville, Bob Blair. So I'm going to give a shout out and a thank you to HCAT for making this possible, to step back in a little bit of time so we can celebrate and honor Bobby.
Keep that. Good.
So many of you may not know that I play the guitar. I actually don't. So here we go. So Ode to the Mayor of Mudville is to the tune of what some of you may remember is the Beverly Hillbillies. Does anyone remember that show? So the introduction to the Beverly Hillbillies is actually called The Ballad of Jed Clampett. So this is set to the tune of The Ballad of Jed Clampett. So if you don't remember how that goes, you actually heard a little of my technological difficulties this morning. You heard a little bit of it, but I'll play it for you again just to make sure that everyone remembers the tune. That may not be able to hear it. Okay? Everybody remember that?
Yep.
All right. And I cannot keep up with that, so I'm going to play my own. All right, I guess. Here we go. Come and listen to a story about a mayor named Blair. A real towny guy from the Mudville area.
He's got a real Irish wit that's indeed quite dry. And through to the core, he's a Holliston guy. The mayor, that is. Flip-flops and flower pots. Well, the next thing you know, old Bob's a journalist. Sort of like the news, but with a Holliston twist. He gets hot tips from the scanner all day. But in the interview, it's always, what did you say? The mayor, that is. He's the man in the big white van. Each and every year, Bob's a champion of the vets, standing up there on the town hall steps. Marsden's at the mic and he goes for more than 10. And under Bob's breath, you hear, God, he's long again. The mayor, that is. Cameraman, watering can. He's got a cute pad in the heart of the hood, next to the spot where the famous Casey stood. In cans out front are the Dahlia's Delight. Pick up a bunch and get lucky tonight. The mayor, that is. Sorting mail, telling tales. He's one of a kind. His type is pretty rare. He's a local icon, even got his own square. We heap on the praise, 'cause it's certainly his dues. But what he really needs is a real pair of shoes. The mayor, that is. Locally grown, Holliston's own. Come on back now, you hear?
The next speaker, you've had referenced by several of the previous speakers. Kevin Conley is a former member of the Board of Selectmen, formerly active in the tire business, local citizen, dedicated. Again, another plain speaker, so let's see what he can add to this morning's festivities. Kevin?
Good morning. Bobby told me that the reason I'm here is to roast John Shanahan. That is so easy. And to start off, John went to Alicante's a couple of weeks ago, and he got a nice dinner, and then he had a take-home, but he left the package there, didn't you, John?
You got it?
I got it. Take a look. What's it?
We'll share at the end of this.
John, open it up, John.
Oh,
It's your fluffernutter.
we could have that today.
He goes to this nice restaurant, and he orders a fluffernutter. Now, John only likes one half of a fluffernutter, but he always orders the whole one. So the half sandwich he doesn't like is the marshmallow fluff side. So he'll try to separate the bread and the peanut butter and just chomp on the peanut butter and the bread and skip the marshmallow. So why does he order a whole Fluffernutter? John?
Beyond me, Kevin.
Beyond your wife, too. There's a bunch of pictures out front here that I put out front of John, and one of them is John's Little League's team picture. In the team picture, John is crying. He's like this. He's right in the middle and the back. He's all upset. And the reason he's crying is because the coach told him he was batting ninth and playing right field. John thought he should be batting first and playing shortstop. Sorry, John. That was a good baseball joke. Can you picture John as a kid, or even now as an adult, wearing his high-top Keds? John, were they white or were they red?
White.
White, I kind of thought so. Then he'd have on his high white socks with stripes on top of them. John, what color were the stripes?
Typically white.
Typically white. He would also have on those shorts, those way too short shorts that makes you want to just cover your eyes. Am I right?
Was the style at the time.
One time we were at a Mudville trip in Baltimore, the Baltimore area. John saw a jockey underwear ad poster. It was Jim Palmer. Does everyone know who Jim Palmer is? It was Jim Palmer, and he was posing in his tiny jockey underwear like this. That's how Jim Palmer was posing. So the next thing you know, there's John standing in front of the Jockey Briefs ad poster with Jim Palmer doing the same exact thing. And there's 2 pictures here of it to prove it. And so John's posing in front of it. John, what are you doing? Posing the same exact way. What was he thinking? Thankfully, John had all his clothes still on. Otherwise, would not have been a pretty scene. But then there was this time we were on George's Island in Mudville. Baseball club was playing there. We see John in the men's bathroom with Sue, who's hiding her eyes right now. And he wasn't wearing any pants.
This one's true.
Just his jockey underwear. We thought he was thinking about modeling for his old Jim Palmer jockey poster ad. Or did he sit in goose poop and need his suit to clean up his pants? John, that was adorable. Of course, nobody else would go in the men's room. Speaking of Sue, she trapped John into marrying her. One day, John turned a corner, and there was Sue stuck on a fence. Intentionally, Sue was stuck on the fence. So John had to push her tush over the fence. When Sue landed, she told John, "Nice job, but now I'm pregnant and you'll have to marry me." So John did the right thing and married her. 5 years later, they had their first child. John said, "That sure was a long pregnancy." Sue said, "Yeah, it was, but the next one will just take 9 months." Sue has a favorite hubby. He's called Happy John. All it takes is 2 glasses of wine. Have you ever heard John sing? No? Well, that's a good thing. John, do you want to try singing something? No. Thank you. John also got jobs as a greeter at Bradley's, Filene's, Jordan Marsh, Lechmere, and Zayres. How'd that work out for those stores? Have you ever heard John talk to strangers? It's like he's known them his entire life and they are best friends. He doesn't stop talking. Am I right?
Somebody's picked up that habit as well.
Oh. And he tries to prove the theory of 6 degrees of separation. So John can say, you know, so-and-so from so-and-so, and 6 degrees of separation, and occasionally he will make it within 6 degrees. That's amazing, John. Am I right?
I'm working at it.
Still. Superette and Fists wouldn't hire John as a greeter. but the Gulf station did. How'd that work out for them? John once went to Montreal for a wild weekend with Peter Gertzen. They were both about 19 years old. Right, John?
20.
20. I said about.
You were right.
Okay. It was a very wild weekend. John watched baseball the entire time.
Those were the days.
John sure knows how to have a good time. I'm only making fun of John because it's easy, and Bobby Blair paid me $250. Thanks, Bobby. But seriously, are we still friends?
Nothing stops this train.
Okay. If not, I'll buy you a couple of wines.
That works.
But to be serious, John is one of the nicest people that you ever want to meet. He's been involved with so much, and he's done so much for the town and for the community, and it's a pleasure to roast him, believe me. But I have one last story that someone gave me last night. It says, don't forget the story about John's first overnight school field trip with one of his kids' classes. His roommate, whom he recently met, decided to short sheet John's bed. John then struggled for some time trying to get into his bed until he shouted out, "Did they make this bed for a midget?" While certainly not politically correct these days, it was very humorous to watch John and him struggle getting into the bed, especially with those gym shorts on. Thank you very much. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks, Kevin. Now we're going to reach our final speaker this morning, Mark Aronian. Before we do, I'm going to thank Mr. Blair for entrusting me with the microphone here today. It was an honor for me to be selected by you to do that, and I appreciate your friendship over the years, and I appreciate you trusting me with doing this function here today. The last speaker today is Mark Aronian, and Mark and I share I guess you could call it a distinction, of having served a single 3-year term on the Board of Selectmen here in town. I don't know what did it for him, but for me it was one vacancy in the police department at the time, and we had about 120 applications, and maybe 20 or 25 of them had a local connection. They either lived here or their mom or dad lived here. They had some route into the community here, and including one applicant who later became chief, whose dad was on the police force at the time, and so there was a fair amount of local pressure to fill that slot with somebody from here. I was on the Board of Selectmen at the time with Carol Dooling, who just coincidentally had been my campaign manager when I ran for selectman. And Carol says, "You know, Bill, we have an all-male police department here in town, and that's not cool." I just kind of looked at her and I said, "Well, Carol, it'd have to be a qualified applicant. I'm not going to go in that direction unless we get a qualified applicant." Well, sure enough, we did get a qualified applicant, and she was a darn good applicant. She came out of Franklin, and she's still on the force now and has served with distinction. So as a result of that, I had at least 20 people or families that would cross the street rather than talk or look at me. And I said to myself, my work as a divorce lawyer is contentious enough. I make enough enemies for a living without doing it gratuitously. So I think I'm going to find some other way to serve the town. So I didn't run for re-election. Mark Aronian served a term. He didn't run for re-election. Maybe he'll touch on what prompted him to make that decision, or maybe he'll just shoot some arrows at the other folks here. So in advance of his comments, let me thank you all for attending here today and your attentiveness during the proceedings, and it's been a wonderful kickoff function, I guess, for the 300. So thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Bill. And, you know, it is election season this year, and it reminded me of the mayor because, you know, he's been our mayor for decades. And it seems as though whenever he runs for office, similar to what happens in Russia, his opponent disappears. And I said, geez, mysteriously, they always do reappear after the election, and Bobby wins the election again easily. And now it's been so many decades, we've just lost count. But we did notice one thing when I was on the select board, that Bobby breaks rules. Yeah, he doesn't always do what you're supposed to do. And so we decided that, being the way things are today, we should talk to the Justice Department about all these matters, and they did hire a special counsel to look into Bobby's situation. And about 3 years later, we got this report back, you know. But we couldn't possibly stay awake that long to read it, so we just read the summary. And the summary says that Bobby willfully did make some mistakes, but that he's such a nice elderly gentleman, we're not going to charge him with anything. And he does have a selective memory, too. Over here we have Dan Miley. Now, you know, have you ever gone to when he was on the finance committee? Did you ever have to go before Dan?
That would be Dan Alfred.
Dan
not Miley.
Alfred.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Miley's no longer with us.
Well, there goes my memory. Well, Dan liked to say no. And one poor department head came to me and said, I was in tears. He just said, no, we're not going to give you an increase in budget. And of course we're not going to give you a raise. This is Holliston. What's the matter with you? But after much deliberation, Ken told him, you know, let's do the right thing. But I feel bad for poor Ken, because after all those years of being on the board with Dan, he lost his hair. You know, it's not easy. But I will say this. Dan is very passionate about protecting the resources of Holliston. And sometimes things get a little blown out of proportion. But we do know his heart's in the right place, and certainly Ken's heart is in the right place, too. It's not easy being on the Finance Committee. You do have to say no. But it can be a little trying sometimes to go before them and intimidating. But I think things are getting better. And then that reminds me of Ken's friend next to him, Kevin. He reminds me of our president. You know, he's always got his head up. He's looking around. He doesn't know where he's going. But luckily, he's got Martha to grab his arm and pull him the right direction. And we can't thank you enough, Martha. And Carolyn, oh my God, if you don't like Carolyn, you got a problem. But there's one thing I will say about Carolyn. We had all these lavish parties and fundraising, and 2 months later, she resigned. I said, what is this? Yeah, takes the money and run. What are you gonna do? Now, James over here, he's everywhere. You go to Facebook, and he's everywhere. And I said to myself, well, when does he go to his office and actually do some work? He's always at some party. But he really does have a great heart. And he goes to all those things to try to show support. And he goes to everything. I don't care what it is. He is there, and he's trying to represent this community. Thank you, James. And John, well, you know, I feel bad for his wife, because he'd rather be playing ball than going to work. And she has to rein him in. John, today is work, not ball. I got a few friends that golf, too. And then one of the wives said to me, you know, Mark, he's not here today. I said, well, I wanted to talk to him. I've got some carpentry. She said, well, it's Wednesday, Mark. I said, yeah? Isn't that a work day? She said, no, That's his golf day. He doesn't care if the house is on fire. He's going golfing. She says, can you picture that? She says, grown men chasing around a little white ball in a field all day. Yeah, that's the way it goes when you play ball, I guess. And then there's the lovely Tina. Well, I'll tell you one thing about Tina. She is aces, absolutely aces, huge heart, but you don't want to get into a disagreement with her because she's going to do all her research, she's going to do all her homework, and she's going to be right most of the time. Thank you all, folks.
Great, thank you. On behalf of the committee that puts this together, thank you all for coming today and showing your support in the town. We hope to see you all around town. Enjoy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you very much.